The US owes a gigantic sum of money, and it keeps growing. But the real shock isn't the size, it's the mechanics. Even if everyone agreed to pay it off, the math, incentives, and interest costs make that far from simple. Today, we'll unpack how the debt is built, who funds it, why refinancing is getting pricier, and whether inflation is a realistic escape hatch or just a risky shortcut. Chapter 1. How a country actually borrows. Think of the federal government like a huge organization with income and expenses. When annual spending is larger than tax revenue, the gap is called a deficit. To bridge that gap, the Treasury sells bonds, IOUs, with a promise. Lend us dollars today, we'll pay you interest and return your principal at maturity. These bonds are bought by a wide mix of investors: households, pension funds, insurance companies, banks, foreign governments, and sometimes even the Federal Reserve. Longer maturities generally pay higher yields. Shorter ones pay less. The point is simple. Deficits don't vanish. They're financed. Chapter 2. Why the debt keeps climbing. If deficits repeat, borrowing repeats. Stack years of shortfalls together and the debt stock grows. It's like rolling a snowball downhill. Each new deficit adds more mass. And the bigger the snowball gets, the more interest it generates every year. That interest becomes part of next year's expenses, which can widen the next deficit if nothing else changes. For a long time, low interest rates kept this manageable. But when rates rise, the cost to roll over maturing debt jumps. Old bonds issued at low yields are replaced with new bonds at higher yields, increasing annual interest expense without buying a single new program or road. Chapter 3. Who actually holds the IOUs and why it matters. Domestic investors buy treasuries for safety and liquidity. Foreign holders, from central banks to large institutions, hold them because US bonds are still a global benchmark. That global demand keeps the Treasury market deep and tradable. It also means a funding disruption wouldn't just hurt one country, it would rattle global finance. Chapter 4. Deficits, priorities, and politics. Why not just fix the deficit? In theory, you raise revenue, cut spending, or do both. In practice, that's where politics enters. Higher taxes are unpopular. Cutting large programs like retirement benefits, health programs, or defense faces resistance. Letting interest costs consume more of the budget squeezes everything else: research, infrastructure, education, unless taxes rise or other spending falls. You can see the bind. The longer choices are delayed, the harder they become because interest compounds too. Chapter 5. The interest rate shock. When the Federal Reserve hikes rates to fight inflation, it cools the economy, but it also pushes up borrowing costs. For households, that means pricier mortgages. For the government, pricier refinancing. As older, cheaper debt matures, it's swapped for newer, more expensive debt, lifting the annual interest bill. This is how a debt spiral can begin. Higher rates, higher interest expense, larger deficits, more borrowing at higher rates. It's not guaranteed, but the risk rises if growth and revenue don't keep up. Chapter 6. Can the US inflate the debt away? Here's the theory. If prices and wages rise over time, past fixed-rate debts become easier to pay back in cheaper dollars. Historically, periods of steady inflation, alongside real economic growth, helped lower debt-to-GDP ratios. But inflation is a blunt tool. Push it too far and you harm purchasing power, unsettle markets, and force the Fed to raise rates, which increases the government's interest costs. The sweet spot is low, stable inflation with healthy productivity growth. Too little growth or too much inflation breaks the math. Chapter 7. The Fed's balance sheet and money creation. When the Fed buys treasuries, it injects liquidity, often called quantitative easing. That can support market functioning and lower yields during stress. But doing it aggressively for too long risks overheating demand and lifting inflation. In other words, printing money isn't a free lunch. It trades near-term relief for potential long-term side effects. Chapter 8, Debt to GDP, the ratio that frames everything. Investors watch the debt-to-GDP ratio to judge sustainability. If the economy grows faster than debt, the ratio falls, even if the absolute debt rises. If debt grows faster than the economy, the ratio climbs, and so do concerns about future taxes, inflation, or spending cuts. Sustainable trajectories come from a mix of growth, moderate inflation, and primary budget discipline. Chapter 9. What would a durable fix look like? There's no magic switch, but there is a formula. Lift productivity, more output per worker, through investment in innovation, energy, infrastructure, and education. Target the deficit with gradual, credible plans. Broaden the tax base, close loopholes, and control the growth of outlays without gutting future growth drivers. Term the debt smartly. Balance short and long maturity issuance to reduce refinancing risk. Keep inflation anchored, enough to grease the wheels, not so much that you torch the engine. Tell the truth. Transparent, data-driven updates that build market confidence. Chapter 10. What if nothing changes? If policy stays on autopilot while rates remain elevated, interest will keep eating a larger share of the budget. That crowds out other priorities or forces more borrowing. Markets tolerate a lot, until they don't. The U.S. benefits from deep markets and reserve currency status. But credibility is earned continuously. Conclusion: hard choices beat hard landings. Paying the debt in full tomorrow isn't the question. Managing it smartly is. Sustainable debt is about the path, not a single number. Grow the economy, keep inflation in the channel, and narrow persistent deficits with predictable phased policy. The longer the can is kicked, the heavier it becomes to lift. There isn't a cheat code, just trade-offs. The earlier they're faced, the cheaper they are to solve. Call to action. If you want more straight talk breakdowns on macro, markets, and money, hit like, drop a comment with your questions, and subscribe. We make complicated topics simple and actionable.